Beginning today's video, I just want to quickly give a huge shout out to everyone who watched the KH3 Remind review. It got way bigger and better of a response than I could have ever hoped for, so thank you guys so much for that. I'm feeling great about it, so I'm gonna continue making videos like this. Unfortunately, right now we're kind of in a lull period. There aren't really too many games coming out at the moment, not much in the way of video game news lately, so I thought I'd fill some space by talking finally about my favorite topic of all time, Chrono Trigger. That's right. For those that do know me, I've actually been streaming for about 10 years, and I'm not like a big streamer or anything, but when I stream, I basically have built the entire stream, my whole internet persona, really everything around Chrono Trigger, because it's just such a part of me and my life. The name, Chrono Kitty, there you go. And I get asked questions sometimes, which I'm so honored by. People who like kind of ask for my opinions on the series and stuff. And I could sit here gushing about it like crazy and tell you all why it's perfect, story, pacing, you know, gameplay, everything. But that's not what this video is about. This video is for people who have heard about Chrono Trigger, probably heard about how perfect it is, and it is, and who just want to know kind of where to start, want to know anything going in, reasons they should play, stuff like that. Chrono Trigger's been around for a long time. It's actually its 25th anniversary this year, so please do something with that square, please, 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 please. But as it's been around for a long time, you know, you would think everyone's probably like, what is there a point to making a video like this? But hey, I think that there could be some people who find a use for it. It's not just as simple, unfortunately, as just go pick up the easy copy, play it, and you're done. There are a few questions to ask, largely what version to buy, because unfortunately, Chrono Trigger is not exactly a simple case where there's just like one absolute, like, easy to get, perfect version, that's it, done. It's a little bit more complicated than that. So I'd like to go over that. I'd like to go over a few questions like, does the length, should I be scared by the length of the game, the multiple endings? Just briefly give my take on it as a Chrono Trigger expert. And I don't consider myself an expert on really many things at all, but that's one of them. That's definitely one of the only ones. But yeah, give my idea. Basically, let's talk about it. Chrono Trigger is, for those who don't know, and you probably do, but just in case, it is an SNES JRPG that revolves around time travel. It's pretty much as simple as that. It basically, because of the time travel, you get to travel through all different sorts of time periods, and it allows for really fun stuff like interacting with dinosaurs and robots in the Middle Ages, and it's all woven into this absolutely incredible story. And the question really should not be at all whether or not you should play Chrono Trigger, because holy shit, you should. Everyone should play it and appreciate it for everything that it is, and one day I'll make a video on why. But the question is how. And like, should I be worried about anything going in? One of the things I do get asked, because I want to cover like just a few questions and then go over the different versions basically. And one of the questions I often get asked is, well, it's a JRPG. People have busy lives. JRPGs are often big time sinks. That's completely fair. And I may not have time for it. And maybe they don't even say that, but you might just be like thinking it. Like, you hear JRPG and yeah, that's a time sink. I think I put 100 hours into Persona 5's main story, for example. But fortunately, and not everyone knows this, but Chrono Trigger is actually one of the shortest JRPGs out there. It is definitely on the shorter side, especially even compared to some of its SNES like counterparts. And it's not to its detriment. It tells the story it needs to tell in that time, and that's actually why, one of the reasons it's so good. It doesn't have really any filler or anything like that. But it ranges, I would say, first playthrough, probably about 25 hours. counting side quests, which I highly recommend anyone does. And really, 25 hours, I mean, in this, like, compared to even some games today, really not that bad. Honestly, I wouldn't consider it that bad, certainly. You can knock it out pretty quick. You can knock it out, love it, and there you go, right? So don't be intimidated by its length. Don't be intimidated by its length. It's a bite-sized adventure. That's one of the greatest things about it. It gives it tremendous replay value. You can get through it so fast, so easily, and you'll love it. I guarantee it. Other things, Chrono Trigger obviously is known for many things. It's the dream team that brought it together. Akira Toriyama's amazing art style. But if there's one thing that it kind of revolutionized in terms of JRPGs, it did many. But one thing it gets lauded for a lot is its multiple endings and its New Game Plus. And some people hear multiple endings and they might think like, oh, okay, is there something to it? Do I need to be worried about which ending I'm gonna get? It probably makes it sound a little bit more complicated than it is. But, and anyone who's played this will attest, it doesn't matter. It's nothing to be worried about going in because there are basically only 2 endings you're going to get on your first playthrough. And luckily, because they're smart, these are basically considered the canon endings. That's debatable, especially regarding some people who have made the game, but I think most would argue that the ending you get upon your first playthrough, one of the 2, and they're very similar. One of the 2 is the canon ending. So you get your full, complete story, one playthrough. Don't worry about, like, the choices. There are choices in the game, but it's not something in the way, like, you know, like, I don't know, Mass Effect, Witcher 3. Don't worry about, like, all that. It's simple. It's Chrono Trigger is beautiful in its simplicity, and it's also so complex, but again, I'm not going to gush about it too much. But yeah, so don't be intimidated by things like that going in. Don't be scared of the length of the game. Don't be scared by the multiple endings. It's all just so good, simple, easy to get through fast. It's one of the easier JRPGs. It's not like super easy, but you're not going to have too much trouble, which is pretty awesome. Only other things I would say going into it, just, well, have fun. I mean, but like, I would say try to really appreciate its detail. Look at every kind of nook and cranny of the game, in the game's world, and everything it has to offer, because there's so much detail to all of it. Just appreciate it, you know. Don't think too hard at it, but yeah, I mean, it is a game that is like praised to no end, and for good reason. It changed my life, really. So, you know, maybe it comes with a level of hype to it, you know, like, that's fair. Like you might have expectations that don't get met. Personally, I think they will, but just in case, just go in, enjoy it, take it for what it is. It's so charming, so modest. Just play it. But if you're gonna play it, and you should, the question is, how do you go about it? And that is the really big part of this video. There are actually quite a bit of versions of Chrono Trigger. Technically, I won't even cover them all, but I'll cover basically the big major ones that you absolutely like are your main options here. And unfortunately, like I said, it's not a case of just one being... There is one that I would say is the absolute best, but it's not a case of like easy accessibility. There's many different factors to take into it, and I want to give you the information so you can make an informed decision on where to begin easily, and just get through it, love it, and just make it as easy as possible, right? So basically, you've got the original SNES version. You've got the PlayStation 1/PlayStation 3 version, you've got the Steam version, you've got the DS version, you've got the iOS version. Those are kind of your big ones, and each come with a few details that I'll give kind of my opinion and what I think you should do based on deciding, and you can take the information and decide for yourself if you're gonna play it. I'll go over, I think, a few just key things about each issue, namely things like just notes about it, features, its accessibility, how cheap is it, how easy can you get it, drawbacks, things that aren't good about the version, you know, and a very special category that I'll call script. And you'll understand what I mean by script very shortly. So let's just begin, I suppose. I have a few notes here that I've written down because I had to make sure, like, kind of looking up online just to see, like, full prices and everything, just to make sure I had it all right. But I'm going to list them, I think, by least recommended version to most. That'll make it more exciting, right? And we begin with probably the most accessible, easy way to play Chrono Trigger, but unfortunately, the worst by far, in my opinion. And that is the iOS version, the version you can play on your phone, iPhone, Android. It's on many of the different stores. Square has released many of their classic games on these. I checked, it is $9.99. It is the cheapest version of the game, excluding one other one. So you would think, oh God, like, it's on there. It's right there. All you have to do is have a phone. It's easy, fast download. It's the cheapest one. It's got to be the winner, right? Well, unfortunately, that's when we get to the drawbacks, right? We've established it's incredibly accessible, but the drawback is, in my personal opinion, the game controls kind of like a nightmare. Because it is played on a full touchscreen and not, a standard handheld console, and this goes for most mobile games, which, to be fair, I don't really play much of, but you touch the screen to move, obviously, and it's an SNES game, so you're going to move a lot. And it creates a virtual joystick in wherever you touch. One cool thing is you can touch anywhere on the screen, but in my opinion, it results in just an incredibly wonky and just really awkward way to play the game. Using your thumb like this, my hand I played through it. I played through most of it just to make sure, and like my hand was slipping a lot. It just drags up too much. Chrono was crashing into walls all the time. I've heard many people in their reviews say that it's not that bad. And maybe if you're more used to these kind of games, it won't matter as much. For this reviewer in particular, for this video person in particular, I couldn't stand it, really. And it's a shame because this version honestly does have a lot of other cool things. It has a neat border that it uses around the game, which is not present in any of the other versions. It's got a good interface, which you can't exactly say for some of the other versions. Like, it was a good intuitive interface. All of Chrono Trigger's interfaces are pretty different. It uses, I didn't even notice it, like, at first, until I had to take a second look. I was like, it uses new overworld sprites, which is cool, because the original ones didn't really look like the characters. They looked like blobs, and now they look more defined. It's pretty neat. As far as features go, it's mainly a port of the DS version, but still missing some of the DS version's features, not huge ones. And I'll get into script now. Not a lot of people know this going in, but the different versions of Chrono Trigger, some of them have a completely different script than the other. When the game was ported over in 2008 to another console, they actually updated the script for the game. And it's mainly the same lines, but they're all entirely rewritten. The whole thing is basically rewritten. In my opinion, it results in a much more sophisticated, sensible, like, just way less awkward, better script. It's so much better. There are people who will argue otherwise, but I personally think it like lines up with character, like, personalities more, the lines they choose. And it really has to do with localization. I mean, localization has been, it's a lot different than it was back then, and it's gotten better. And because of that, it's also closer to the original Japanese translation. So if you're a purist, there you go. All that would be great, but I just think the controls kill it here. So I can't honestly, in good faith, recommend the iOS version. If you have no other way to play the game, no other way, no ifs, ands, or buts, you can do it. I think just go in knowing that you might experience some frustration with the controls. It can be done, but it's not the one I'd recommend. Next on my list, personally, is actually the PlayStation 1/PlayStation 3 port, and it's kind of hard to track down in public because it actually doesn't even look like Chrono Trigger because it's part of a bundle. It actually has Final Fantasy IV included and Chrono Trigger, and the title is Final Fantasy Chronicles. Basically, this was the first original, like, kind of other port of the game after the original SNES version. They brought it to PS1, and it's basically the PS1 version. As far as script, it is of course the old one. SNES version. And so as far as script goes, it's the old script. You might care about that, you might not. I personally do. And it's big, kind of, as far as features go, one of the big things that this one really brought to the table were the introduction of full motion video cutscenes. Obviously, the SNES was not capable of that. So they take some of the cutscenes of the game and they add in really neat, illustrated by Akira Toriyama cutscenes that kind of show the same content from the original sprite scenes. And they're cool. They're not voiced, they're short, but they're cool. And really, what it boils down to is a version of the SNES one that would normally be much better. There are some problems, though. Well, it does obviously lack some of the more modern features of the game, which I'm going to tell you aren't a huge deal, other than the script. But number one, it's not going to be easy to necessarily find. For starters, you got to get this version, which thankfully is very cheap. It came out to $17.99 on Amazon. So if you do like playing on PS1 or PS2, for example, for some reason, then sure, go for it. As far as getting it on PS3, it is just like the iOS version. It is $9.99, so you can get it on the PS3 store. So yeah, it's a port of the original version, which is cheaper for sure. A little hard to track down as far as accessibility goes, obviously. But the big problem with this one, and the reason it's not as higher up as the other ones, is this one is the only one to my knowledge that has loading times. And I did replay it again just to make sure, and yes, there are loading times, as I remembered. Battles might take a couple seconds to start. It might load in between areas. It's kind of jarring. It's odd playing like an SNES game with like defined loading times. There are many technical reasons for that, not necessarily important, but it could affect your purchase unless you for some reason really like playing on PlayStation, which is fair. I'd say the loading times personally are worth it if in every other version you don't get it. So I wouldn't recommend that version, but totally playable if you have to. Totally playable. So take that information and decide as you will. The next one for me on the list, and I think this is where it's going to start to get controversial, I would actually say is the original SNES port. And there are reasons for this. Obviously, this is the one that started it all. This is the one that created a legacy. This is the one that everyone knows, and obviously for good reason. So yes, it's a phenomenal game. There's nothing really wrong with it, honestly. The reason I can't personally put it at the top or second top of the list is accessibility, for one, because it's going to be hard tracking down an SNES cart in public for sure. You also have to have an SNES, which even especially modern gamers you might not have. But even upon looking online, the much easier way to track it down, it still really ranges up there. It was actually about $124 when I saw it on Amazon, and I would assume you would need to buy it from a seller or eBay, which I kind of checked. Cheaper on eBay, but it's up to you, obviously. If you're someone who likes to play it in its original form, go for it. It's incredible. Obviously, it's the old script, so for me, that's a personal drawback. And because it's kind of the older version, the visuals are a little bit muddier, but it's basically a perfect game that everyone fell in love with. So if you can track it down, then perfect, great. I just have trouble personally saying like, oh yeah, go for this one, because it's not going to be easy to go for this one for most people. So absolutely amazing, but only if you can get it. And no, you're getting the old script, which in my opinion is a drawback. Yeah, not a terrible one, but you get the idea. The next one on my list, and like I said, this is when it's gonna get controversial, the second best version to go for, to my mind, is actually the recent Steam port. Now, anyone who hasn't been following the Steam port too much is probably screaming at their computer screen right now, because this port is kind of infamous. When it was first released, it was plagued by just horrible interface, this new visual style that was god awful. It was so ugly, it looked like barf. Glitches, crashing, what have you. Normally I'd say, oh god, steer clear from this one by all means. But over time, they basically fixed it. Not entirely, but they changed the interface to be a little bit easier. It is a port, I'll get into that, but they changed the interface to be a little bit better. They made it so you can go to the original visual style. And if you do that, I'm pretty sure by default it's turned on HD graphics. I pulled out the wrong one. It's turned on HD graphics. And you don't want that. That's the bad one. That's like the one where they tried to define everything more and it looks bad. Go to the original. Set that. They added that. They fixed most of the glitches. I'll get into that in a second. But it is a port of the DS version, which is the newer recognizes the newer version of Chrono Trigger, which means it has a lot of its features, such as things like extra dungeons, a little bit of extra content, extra weapons. They're not amazing, so like it's not like absolutely because it has that, go purchase it. You won't miss too much if you don't have it, but it's there. It's a more complete version. It's a more modern version. It's of course got the new script. I think that's a good thing. It is missing some of the features of the DS version, which is like the modern version. There are things like a bestiary and like this little feature called the dojo, where you could like get descriptions for all the moves you learn in the game. Somewhat small little useful stuff like that that's in the DS version is not here, but mostly all of it else is still here. Normally I'd say like take into account accessibility, like the game is $14.99. It's actually a little bit more than the iOS version. I think it's well worth the price. It's $14.99. All you have to do is have a computer, internet connection, Steam, done. Bam. Great, right? Unfortunately, I have still heard that people have recounted issues with it as far as glitches and technical stuff. I played through it. I didn't really have much of a problem with it. I didn't have a crash personally. I saw a little bit of like judder and stuff like that, but it was a perfectly playable port in my opinion. But I have heard people that I trust say that it has crashed on them and stuff like that, especially at incredibly important moments. You don't want that. So bear that in mind. It's a version I can easily recommend now, thank God, and it's like the easiest one to get, so that's like awesome that there's a really decent version that's easy to get. So really, it's probably the one you're probably gonna go with if you don't have like too many options or resources, and that's totally cool. But I cannot say that it is the absolute end-all best version of Chrono Trigger. If you are able to, if you are in the position, there is one version that above all is the absolute king that you definitely want if you're gonna play this game, and that, my friends, is the DS version. Drawbacks: none, unless you don't like playing on a handheld. The DS version was basically, they took the game and reported it again in 2008 to the Nintendo DS. This was the first time, this was the initial time they added in all the new features, the new script, the new dungeons, weapons, dojo, bestiary, a couple extra modes that aren't important. But it is by far the most complete version of Chrono Trigger. It is by far, in my opinion, the best. The sprites are so crisp and so beautiful on that little screen. It's so beautiful. It actually has updated sound effects that are present in some of the other versions. Although, I think, to be honest, this one is still distinct in some ways, such as like character cries and stuff like that. I definitely have noticed that, Frog in particular. And in my opinion, just everything about this one is just absolutely by far the definitive version. The most features, the new script. It looks the best. With headphones, it sounds amazing. I think it's probably the best audio-wise too. It is easily the one I say play if you can. I think few would argue this is by far the best version of the game. It's how I originally played it. Drawbacks, none. Script, the new one, the most features. There is unfortunately one reason that, like, it sucks that I can't just say, yeah, go get it. You have to have a DS, for one, which a lot of people don't have anymore. 2, you have to buy it, obviously, and unfortunately, it's gone up in price over the years. I saw it today for $64. I think it was new on Amazon. 34 used from like a seller on GameStop used. It's $40. In my opinion, well worth the price, but if you're stripped for cash, totally get it. Totally understand, and unfortunately, that makes it one of the harder ones to get. The other thing for me personally is if you're gonna play this version, I recommend that you have one of the smaller model DS's. I wouldn't recommend doing it on a 3DS or one of the bigger screen DS's because it blows up the pixels and they don't look as good. There's a feature you can use to like make it the original size, but it kind of looks awkward because you get a bunch of negative space. So yeah, there's a lot of, unfortunately, circumstances you have to play this version. But holy shit, if you can, and you can play it on a smaller DS, it's done. That's it. It just sucks that, like, there isn't just one version I can point to that says that's the one that's easiest to get, that's by far the one that's just absolutely perfect. To my mind, Square wants to just make this perfect, just port this version and all its features, upscale it in HD on Switch, online, like $10 on the eShop. There you go. That would be it. That's the dream. But unfortunately, that hasn't happened. So I've given you the information. What would I say? Basically, if you can, play this one. SNES version is fine. Wouldn't recommend PS1 or iOS, but PS1's okay. Original SNES is fine, tough to get. Steam is probably the one you're gonna play, and it's totally cool. So yeah, take that information. If I had to say, like, your biggest priorities are price and availability, Steam version, for sure. But if you don't mind putting in a little bit extra effort, DS version, without a doubt. Without a shadow of a doubt. I'll be interested to see what other people think. Yeah, those are the versions of Chrono Trigger. And those are basically the ones that I would recommend you pick based off your circumstances. Once you have it, love it, play it, see everything that other people see in it, see why I love it so much, hopefully. Again, I know, like, it's not, like, particularly, you know, a very new thing for people, but as somebody who just is so passionate about it, that's my take. Hopefully someone can get some use out of it. And above all, just enjoy. Let me know what you think, honestly. To close out, I just want to once again say thank you for all the support. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, obviously you can like the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want. Ring the bell. Ring Lean's bell? Nadia's bell? Ooh, I gotta start making that a thing, don't I? All that jazz, you know the drill. I'm definitely planning on making more content like this. I'm super excited with how everything is going, so yeah, hope you look forward to it. Thank you so much for watching. Go play Chrono Trigger! Go play it! Go!